Radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination. That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. My name is Brian Hyde. Today we're going to be talking about perception versus reality. And it's playing out in a fairly interesting way here in the Gem State. Let me give you an example of what this looks like. I don't know who came up with this graphic, but it's a very solid illustration of the perception that Idaho has a GOP supermajority, right? There's a very solidly red state, lots of Republicans, they've got an iron lock. That's the perception. So in the House and Senate, there's the number of registered Democrats in blue versus number of registered Republicans in red. Seems like it's, big supermajority. But when it comes to how they vote, the reality is, look at all those blue dots. This includes GOP members who voted against the GOP platform, who voted in line with the GOP, the ones who voted in line with the GOP platform are in red. Look at that. More often than not, this is how it goes. And it's, I'm not the first person to point this out. This has been observed by many people with the idea of how do you solve this problem? During election seasons, these Republican legislators particularly will sit there and run as conservatives. Oh, yes, I believe in small taxes. I believe in smaller government. I support the Second Amendment. Look, here's a picture of me duck hunting. But how do they vote? Almost invariably, they are voting for more government, more cost in terms of taxes coming out of your pocket, more intrusion into your life, more rules, more laws, more ways that the government can insinuate itself or its preferred ideology, in the case of the schools, into your children's lives. Pretty interesting stuff. So the perception there, I don't know why it persists, but it does. Now, that brings us to Senator Chuck Winder going on, I guess, in the last couple of days, there's been a little bit more to his tirade. Two of the state senators, Scott Herndon and, I'm trying to remember who the first one was. Glenita Zweiterville. She and he both received letters from Chuck Winder telling him basically, you have disparaged and you have been, you have broken decorum by talking ill about the state Senate. Now, look, if all they were doing was rabble-rousing, if all they were doing was, trolling people trying to get a reaction, I would say, okay, that was probably a well-earned rebuke. But you know what they did that attracted Chuck's attention? They called out misspending. They called out too much crony, policy making with the big politically connected lobbyists who spend a lot of money on their reelection campaigns. Now, look, they were calling out things that are questionable, maybe legal, but still kind of shady. And this is where Chuck Winder really got upset. So Kent Marmon, in an editorial piece for TrueIdahoNews.com, made some very solid observations. I share these with you just in the interest of, I think he has probably the best take on this. He says, a few days ago, Senate pro tempore Chuck Winder wielded his power in two letters, one to Senator Scott Herndon, one to Senator Glenita Zweiterville. In each letter, he demanded they apologize for saying things about their fellow legislators to, quote, respect the legislative process. In other words, talk about the policy or talk about the bill, but not the person. Okay, but if the person's actions are supporting something that's harmful, maybe we need to talk about why is the person supporting this? What Herndon and Zweiterville said was truthful, but Winder didn't like it. And that's the key. If what they were saying was false, they would have no right to go out there and spread lies. They weren't spreading lies. They were pointing the flashlight in an uncomfortable direction for Senator Winder, among others. Now, this is the same Chuck Winder who called members of the Idaho House of Representatives purveyors of craziness and mischief. He also told the Idaho Capitol Sun in March of 2022, there are a lot of bills, more so than normal, that are in drawers on our side of the building. I think most of them will stay there, so I don't think you'll see some of the craziness that the House seems to like to get very far in the Senate. Now, I just have to make sure you understand what he's saying there. In other words, bills that have passed the House, been duly debated and moved on and passed the House, will come to the Senate, but instead of bringing them up for debate, as the Senate pro tem, I can make sure that they're being those bills are being put in the drawer. They're being kept, presumably just till the clock runs out and the legislature goes home. I know it's how politics is done, but it's something about that still doesn't exactly pass the sniff test. Now, in this editorial, two of the bills he was talking about were passed by the House in 2022. One, H666, that would have required librarians to move books defined in Idaho law as pornographic and or obscene out of the children's sections of public and school libraries. The other one, H675, forbade hormonal therapy or gender reassignment in children. Now, on the library bill, Winder said, I assigned it to Senate State Affairs for good reason, so hopefully it will go there. We'll talk to our caucus about it. We'll make sure they're aware of what the options are, but I don't think it advances. Again, this is sitting on these bills because he was working in partnership with, what was her name? Lodge. I'm sorry, her first name escapes me, but she was kind of the caretaker of this. Here's a list of just a few of the bills that Chuck Winder, with the help of Patty Lodge, sorry, there it is, Patty, put in the drawer for safekeeping. Now, I want you to notice the common theme to each one of these bills. Okay? Does it expand government? Does it constrain government? House Bill 439, changing the deadline for unaffiliated voters to affiliate with a party by the candidate's filing deadline. Okay, he opposed this. Well, he drawered it so it wouldn't ever come up. How about House Bill 475, removing a section of Idaho code that makes it illegal for groups to parade on streets with firearms? Opponents said, oh, that's going to open the door to private militias in Idaho. By the way, why is that such a bad idea? House Bill 531, requiring approval from the Idaho Historical Society before a division of state or local government can permanently remove historical monuments or memorials. House Bill 547, making it a misdemeanor to turn in absentee ballots for any person who is not a relative or a roommate. I wonder why you would oppose that. How about this one? This is a big one for me. House Bill 631, prohibiting the state of Idaho and any of its political subdivisions from mandating the use of face masks, face shields, or other face coverings for the purpose of preventing or slowing the spread of a contagious disease. You can guess why that's a big deal. And last but not least, House Bill 665, removing the Idaho Attorney General as a member of the Idaho Constitutional Defense Council. Now, some of these, maybe they haven't stood the test of time so great. But on most of them, you'll notice you still get bigger government, you get more government because, we want to put those bills down that in favor of going after ones that actually favor, IACI and others, other lobbying groups. So we continue to have state-defined pornography and obscenity on open display in libraries and available to our minor children for checkout. By the way, I question about whether it's open display. It may be in some places. I honestly don't know, but I would want some clarification on that. As for the craziness of the House spilling over into the Senate in 2023, yes, because a library bill to restrict access to such books did make it through both the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, it was vetoed by the governor, and it failed an override in the House by one vote. So much for protecting the innocence of our children, but apparently that was too close for comfort. Now Chuck Winder and his IACI handlers, they really don't like that. This is why Senators Weiderveld as well as Senator Hernston were gone after. Winder's using the power of his office, Senate pro tempore, to go after his political rivals, going even so far as to remove Senator Weiderveld from her vice chairmanship of the Senate Health and Welfare Committee for doing nothing less than educating her constituents about what's really going on instead of working for leadership. I'm glad that's at least in quotes there, or many of the special interest groups like IACI who believe it's they who should control the actions of state government. Okay, I get it. For some people, this is, going to sound like, this sounds very conspiratorial. At the same time, look at the incredible union between government and corporations. Look at the number of corporations that are supporting things like DEI and ESG, and look how woke the corporations have become. They are captured institutions. And so when you say, maybe this isn't such a good idea to have the lobbyists have such a cozy relationship with lawmakers, essentially what we're saying is, does it make sense that is it wrong to question whether someone is purchasing policy or writing legislation and then just, supporting the right candidate to make sure that it gets passed? I get it. This is how politics is done. But when someone stands up and says, look, there are things that are right for government to do and that are not right for government to do, why is it that they are gone after in this fashion? And this is what Chuck Winter's doing. I mean, he's trying to call them in like he's their daddy and I'll put you over my knee. Don't you think I won't do it? It's very patronizing the way he's treating these legislators. Now, there are other senators who speak out against things that Chuck Winter wants, but he doesn't need to send threatening, intimidating letters to all of them. By the way, quick update, Senator Brian Lenny, also received one of those nasty grams from Chuck Winter as well. And Lenny's reaction was, you're not my dad, and you are not my boss. The people who elected me are my boss. Anyway, more on that in just a few moments. But the op-ed says, political action committees friendly to Brad Little and his IACI family and his IACI friends can do this. In fact, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, one of these political action committees recently attacked Senators Chris Trakel, Brian Lenny, and Tammy Nichols, saying that they were trying to turn Idaho into San Francisco. Now, if you know anything about any of these senators, you know how utterly laughable that is. But this was done through a hit piece put out by Idaho Liberty PAC, a deceptively named political action committee that receives funds from other PACs and organizations through what amounts to a money laundering scheme. And we're going to show you how this flows in such an interesting fashion that now the governor is actually called into question a bit. The so-called Idaho Liberty PAC spent nearly $50,000 on hit piece literature and paid people to go out and deliver it door to door in these three senators' districts. And the content of the hit pieces distorted the voting records of the senators so badly, it would be well within anyone's rights to say that they were full of lies. Now, here's what you need to understand. The politicians who place R's after their names but vote like leftists are desperate. Many of them affiliate with the so-called Main Street Caucus, who claim the conservative label but will do anything to cover up their truly crazy and mischievous activities to lead you into believing that they are the good guys. They will talk the talk. They will tell you whatever you want to hear. They'll say what they have to say to get elected or reelected, and then do whatever they have to do to keep the money, funding, and support coming to keep them in power. Now, the article says the 5 senators I've mentioned who are being attacked are actually listening to and working hard for you. This is not hyperbole. He's telling the truth here. That's the one common thread and these 5 names, it took me a little while to catch on to who was who, but these are the champions of limited government acting in its proper role, which is keeping you and me free. That's what it's supposed to do. They openly state they do not work for IACI. They work for the people of the state of Idaho. They don't work for special interest groups or political action committees. Like any other animal acts, when their survival is threatened, swamp creatures in the Idaho legislature will attack. And that's what they're doing right now. That's what you're seeing in Chuck Winter's threatening letters. But the op-ed finishes by saying the only special interest that anyone serving in our legislature should represent is you. By the way, I did see a tweet from Senator Brian Lenny that explains, look, I stand firmly with and for everyday Idahoans. To make a real difference, to fight for the forgotten man, he says, I have zero interest in bending the knee and kissing the ring of woke corporate agendas. Okay? Ask yourself, why do all the big players, though, from the governor on down, why is it in their interest to do so? It comes down to that money. Right now, they're spending a lot of that money trying to attack the people who are trying to keep government within its boundaries as a servant rather than a master. Brian says, anytime someone tries to silence the message of the people, all it does is add fuel to the fire. We are Idaho. Bring it. I like that, Brian is one of those people, Senator Brian Lenny, I'm gonna pay him some long overdue praise here. He's an effective leader in the sense that he knows his stuff. He will study things out. But the thing I like most about him is he's also not guilty of taking himself so seriously. Oh, well, do you feel appropriately, sorrowful for this or that? Or are you sure? He's a solid, principled individual. And I'm sure that must drive some of his critics absolutely insane. Well, you don't represent Idaho at all. No, maybe he just doesn't jive with you. But I love the fact that he can't be bullied. He stands right up, dishes it right back to him, and he keeps a sense of humor. More people would benefit from keeping a sense of humor as it applies not just to politics, but pretty much all of life. So, speaking of a sense of humor, just a quick reminder here for Chuck Winter. See that thing with the Idaho Capitol? Yeah, that's where your Senate rules apply. Everywhere else, they don't apply there. All right. So let's talk about Brad Little's Political Action Committee and the Idaho Victory Fund sharing the same P.O. box in Boise. What a coincidence, says Brian Allman from the Gem State Substack. Now, Brian has actually done a couple of articles on this just in the last couple of days. He is connecting dots, and I strongly recommend you take a look at his work. Here's the question that arises. Is Republican Governor Brad Little funding the attack on his own party's Republican senators? Because there is reason to believe, and we can start tracing some of these things to see that, look at this, Friends of Brad Little, the part that's circled there in yellow, P.O. Box 615, Boise, Idaho. Okay, so this is, seeking fundraising for Brad Little's campaigning. So let's see, who else is in here? There we go. Idaho Victory Fund, P.O. Box 615. Very good. Okay, what about the group that released these ads attacking these Idaho legislators? Let's see who's that's. Same Friends of Brad Little, P.O. Box 615. Wait a minute. Now, I understand political action committees are going to use the same P.O. box. It saves time and everything, but let's break down what happened here. Idaho Inaugural Committee, Friends of Brad Little, Political Action Committee, donated $500,000 in March of this year to the Idaho Victory Fund, which in turn donated $75,000 on two separate occasions, March 20, I can't see if that's 26th or 28th, 2023, and October 12th of this year, to the Idaho Liberty PAC. I think it shares the same P.O. box. Did I see that right? Which spent $71,000 in donations, both in October and in November, attacking conservative legislators. Now, here's the thing. When this money was first donated, it was donated with the understanding that this was going to be used to fight against Joe Biden. Okay, this is a Republican governor in what again is perceived as a very Republican state. So why wouldn't they use that money to stand up and make sure that we're, solidified and going to be supporting, somebody other than Joe Biden? But it appears that instead, Governor Little, threw a little sleight of hand here. This money goes here. Which card is the right one? He spent a lot of money attacking fellow Republicans. This is how Brian Allman puts it, and I don't disagree with his conclusion here. He says it's really not a good look when you put it all together. Little solicited donations on the premise of fighting Joe Biden, only to give a large amount of money to a political action committee that hired an out-of-state firm to distribute attack ads against 3 conservative senators. So here's the question I would like you to just ponder. Okay, I'm not saying you don't have to agree with me in any way. Is it possible that there are interests other than good governance and the proper role of government, keeping us safe and, keeping us free, mostly keeping us free? Is there something more that's going on there that is prompting these attacks? And I would challenge you to think about it in these terms. These 5 senators who've been named, and there are other legislators too, but these ones that are under attack right now, what is it that they are so guilty of? Is it reducing the power of the state? Because if that's the big beef against them, and if you agree, well, that's right, that's why we got to get them out of there. They're against increasing the state's power. If that's your take, I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem. I mean, it's rare enough to get people who are principled in politics in the first place, but to get ones who will actually put their neck out there on the line and dare people to take a chop at it while they're standing up for your freedoms, that's even more rare. So don't be buffaloed into thinking, well, they must deserve it if somehow they're just interfering with the government, making our lives worth living. Your lives are made worth living much more in proportion to the degree that government gets out of your way and allows you to do what you need to do. Like I say, you don't have to agree with me. I don't expect you to, but I would ask you, please think about that. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
Indoctrination? That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot.
That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.